Get your watermelons out. Ross Chastain won at Kansas. Kyle Busch is left numb. And if you were a playoff driver, you had a stressful day more than likely. Welcome back to the Breaking Balls channel. It's Bob here. Oh, what a day in the shadows of Kansas City for the NASCAR Cup Series. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We'll keep you in the loop for all things NASCAR here at Breaking Balls. But without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Today was the day we've been waiting for. Kansas, after the spring race that delivered the last few years, it's delivered with this next-gen car. The Hollywood Casino 400, the first race of the round of 12 in the NASCAR playoffs is here. And Ross Chastain comes away as the winner, breaking through for the first time in 2024. The Watermelon Man smashes his watermelon at the victory stripe in Kansas, home of the closest finish in NASCAR history now, and they finally lined up that finish line there just in time for watermelon pieces to be smashed all over. It's nice to see Chastain get back into victory lane for the first time since that Phoenix Championship race in November, where he definitely made no friends with Ryan Blaney, who ended up winning that championship race, but Chastain got the victory that day. Chastain held off William Byron for the last 20 laps in an aero battle there. Byron just couldn't get closer than 2 or 3 tenths there in those last few laps. He got a little bit closer to the back bumper, but nothing close enough to make him aero tight there. And for Ross Chastain, it was just a professional drive there at the end. I'm glad to see him finally getting the victory, and you could tell it was a weight lifted off of his shoulders. He even said how big this was for him and his team. After Daniel Suarez got that win in Atlanta early on in the season, you kind of wondered, okay, well, when's Ross Chastain going to break through? As the face of that trackhouse team, he had a championship 4 run in 2022 and has become a face of the NASCAR Cup Series garage, but still hadn't had that win breakthrough until this week at Kansas. So very nice to see that one team get into victory lane for Ross Chastain, one of the good guys in the garage. It was the non-playoff drivers, though, who were in contention late, as Chastain beat Martin Truex Jr. on a late restart, taking the lead there, and then, of course, holding off Byron. But Martin Truex Jr. was in there, and, of course, Kyle Busch. This looked like the week we might finally get Kyle Busch to get that win, to keep that win streak alive, to get that 20-year win streak alive. It would be a record in NASCAR. But still, Rowdy is winless. Just a bitter pill to swallow for that 8 team. He had a very good pit sequence late that kept him out in front of the lead. He and Ross Chastain battled back and forth for a few laps until Kyle Busch pulled away. And then with 32 to go, tried to get around playoff contender Chase Briscoe to lap him. And the 14 car gave him a little bit of room on the outside heading into turn 1. And then slowly went up track until there was just enough room probably to fit that 8 car through coming out of turn 2. But Kyle Busch tagged the wall, overcorrected, and then lost control of that 8 car. Ended up battling back, staying in the top 10 there, but the chance at the win was mired there. And you could just tell how defeated Kyle Busch was at the end of that race in his post-race interview. Didn't blame Chase Briscoe. You really thought we might get a fired up Kyle Busch, but instead he just says how numb he is to the fact that he didn't win today. And you could just tell behind those sunglasses was a lot of emotion that we don't usually see from Kyle Busch, a guy who is very stoic, at times brash, unapologetic. But this was a different side of Kyle Busch. You thought maybe this would be the week for the 8 team after they've had a very decent second half to the season with decent race pace in that 8 car, but just haven't been able to get him into that position late in the race to take that checkered flag. And another week where Kyle Busch is thinking, what if? Even as fans, those last 20 laps of him holding off Ross Chastain, I think it would have been a very good battle. It might have even been better than what we got with Chastain and Byron, but again, it's just a what if there for us as fans, and more importantly for Kyle Busch and that 20-year win streak to be determined. Overall, Christopher Bell probably had the best car today, was looking to win stage 2, and then on a late restart, he tagged the wall for the second time today. I think he ended up tagging it 3 times in total, but Christopher Bell and that 20 car had great speed, and for the 8th time his career led over 100 laps, but yet, once again, for the 3rd or 4th time you could make an argument this year, Christopher Bell had the best car and didn't win. Snake bitten once again, but it was his own mistakes that did him in, riding that high line and tagging the wall. That's the risk you run with that 20 car, the line he was taking, running so close to the wall. He tagged the wall and, lost a lot of momentum when he probably should have swept the entire race with the speed he had in that 20 car. But overall, if you were a playoff driver, today you faced adversity, like I said in the intro. 9 of the 12 playoff drivers I have in my notes were involved in some sort of mess or mistake on the race today. Of course, whether it was a pit road penalty or someone like Kyle Larson spinning, we'll get to that later. It just seemed like the guys that were making mistakes today were the playoff drivers, and maybe that's just because What is at stake right now? With every position so key, maybe they're white knuckling it. Maybe the pressure is so tight on these playoff drivers that you're seeing the mistakes because of the pressure that is on them. It's magnetized tenfold for these guys. As far as pit crew, Denny Hamlin's pit crew today did him no favors. He had a top 5 car all day, and every single time he got into the top 5 or was in the top 5, pit road would strike, and he'd be back in 14th, 15th, and have to claw his way back up there. And once he'd be back up in the top 5, caution would come out. We're redoing it. Oh, Denny Hamlin's jack dropped a little too early. Oh, lug nut loose. The lug nut loose was the whole story for the Penske team, though. Denny Hamlin wasn't just the only playoff driver. The entire Penske team was affected by loose lug nuts today. If it was the first half of the race, you thought, oh my goodness, Penske brought some speed today in these cars. But instead, a horrible, no good, dirty, rotten, awful half for the Penske team. Austin Cindric got it started after getting stage points in the first stage, then had a loose lug nut, had to come down after battling his way back on pit road, had a spin late, touched the front of his car, was never the same. Ryan Blaney was the same thing, had to come down pit road to make sure he had a lug nut tight on that car after giving up top 10 track position. And Joe Logano was a guy who you could make an argument as well, had a top 3, maybe top 2 car today, especially in that first half of the race. But what do you know? Joe Logano had a pit road mistake too, where the lug nut was loose and he had to come back down. So the Penske pit crew, normally very spot on and precise, not this week. Along with Denny Hamlin's pit crew, some of those playoff pit crews really need to tighten up their focus moving on to Talladega next week. But I mentioned it briefly. Kyle Larson was the main story before we started talking about Kyle Busch potentially winning today. Kyle Larson had an early spin where he cut a tire, was in a lucky and fortunate spot to be close to the wall where he barely went into the wall. Then it could have backed his car up like an Atlanta wreck, but instead scraped the wall. But rear diffuser was messed up when he tagged the wall, and every time there was a caution, he had to come down pit road for repairs. And you could tell it was a stressful day for that 5 team. But if there's confidence in any team under duress, it's the 5 team, especially with Cliff Daniels at the helm. That man is just so calming and relaxing. When there's moments, he goes, hey, we're going to get this fixed. You're going to have to come down a few times. But for Kyle Larson, it was not a good day, but it could have been worse. It was just limping around and making it to the end there. And overall, if you're a playoff driver, just not a banner day. Like I said, the 3 drivers at the end that we were talking about, Kyle Busch, Ross Chastain, Martin Truex Jr., not playoff drivers. None of them. Alex Bowman had a brief shot when he sent it 3 wide on that late restart. And you could argue Alex Bowman's probably been the most consistent playoff driver of anyone since we started back in Atlanta 4 weeks ago. The fact that Alex Bowman has probably been the most consistent guy out of the entire playoff grid, didn't have that on my bingo card, but I guess with the pressure turned on that 48 team with those rumors a few weeks ago of Justin Haley, he's really figured it out. I'm glad to see that for Alex Bowman. Overall, though, let's jump into the results a little bit here. We did talk about Chastain and Byron Truex, those 1, 2, 3. Ryan Blaney did figure it out there in 4th, and Ty Gibbs was the other Toyota guy in the top 5 there. Had consistent speed all weekend, Ty Gibbs. He thought maybe with the pressure of being out of the playoffs, out of the window, maybe he could finally get that first win of his career. We're going to have to wait another week, unfortunately, for that 54 team, but I think the time is coming for Ty Gibbs. Denny Hamlin fighting back for 8th with Christopher Bell in 7th. Like I said, Christopher Bell just probably should have won this race if it's just off race speed, but mistakes. Chase Elliott, 9th place today. Alex Bowman and William Byron were the guys that were carrying the Hendrick water today. Chase Elliott started at the back with engine issues that started during practice and qualifying yesterday, and it just seemed like he never really could get it going. Was lucky to miss an early spin with AJ Allmendinger and Josh Berry. Chris Buescher, the runner-up in the spring race, 11th place. Daniel Suarez, Ross Chastain's teammate, ended up 13th. Not a horrible day, all things considered. And also, Corey LaJoie in 15th place in his new digs in the Rick Ware Racing 15. Nice to see Corey LaJoie getting the best finish for that Rick Ware team at Kansas in their team's history. Shout out to Corey LaJoie making the most of this opportunity for sure. Harrison Burton in 23rd. There's our weekly shout out to him. And when you look toward the end of this running order, Jimmy Johnson in 36th. That man has a beef with getting through a clean first lap. Was caught up in that first lap incident with Josh Berry and AJ Allmendinger, but Jimmy Johnson, when he is doing these one-off races, I think he's done 5 or 6 this year, just seems like the first lap the last 2 years, he's gotten caught up in something. Let that man run a full race with no incident. As we look to the playoff grid, heading to the calm, cool, collected race that will be Talladega, nothing will happen there, I'm sure. We see that William Byron leading the playoff grid with Ryan Blaney right behind him and Christopher Bell also in 3rd. Those guys feel like they're in a decent spot heading to Talladega. Everyone else, though, is a little sweaty. Kyle Larson and Tyler Reddick, we thought were going to be guys as the 1 and 2 seeds coming into this week. maybe in a good spot with Kansas. They're historically good here. No. Kyle Larson only 18 points to the good, and Tyler Reddick out of the cut line right now. If the playoffs ended today, Tyler Reddick is the one going home. After Kansas would not have had that on the bingo card for the regular season champion. Denny Hamlin would love to have those 10 playoff points back, but it didn't hold him back too much today. 11 points above the good. Alex Bowman and Chase Elliott on the Hendrick side, really, really strong for the 48 team. Like I said previously, probably the most consistent playoff driver in the grid. And if on the other hand, Austin Cindric was one of those guys that you can make a case for up until that spin in stage 2, really ruined his day. And now look at him, 29 points under the cut line. Very tough for that Penske number 2 team. And for Chase Briscoe, 25 points under the cut line. I guess that's punishment for taking away Kyle Busch's win streak. But no, on a serious note, like I said, I think Chase Briscoe just baited Kyle Busch, and Kyle Busch was too impatient there. It's Kyle Busch's fault. But anyway, moving forward, it'll be Talladega next week. But before we even move forward to the big one and the monster that Talladega is, let me know your thoughts down below. I want to know Ross Chastain's win, the playoff grid leaving Kansas. Overall today, just what did you think? I thought it was a pretty overall decent race. We probably have a very high bar for Kansas, and it maybe didn't meet quite that bar, but it was still a very strong race overall. And I think it couldn't be as bad as Joe Logano air blocking Kevin Harvick back in 2021. So let me know down below. If you're new here to the channel, go ahead and subscribe and like this video. It helps me out a ton here at Breaking Balls, and I'll keep you in the loop for everything NASCAR related. Talladega next week. We'll see what happens in the rumor mill and the news cycle. Up until then, I'll keep you in the loop for everything here at Breaking Balls. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.